Professor SUMIOKA's University Standard Philosophy course. Hi everyone! Ancient China again.
The topic today is Confucianism. Although it evolved from Taoism, it has become as influential as Taoism and Buddhism.
Indeed, we learned Confucius believed in Tao. Nevertheless, how did Confucianism become independent of Taoism?
It also had another historical root, the Chinese family system, Zongzi. Unlike Europe, China is centered on fertile plains and open on all sides. Therefore, various folks and tribes gathered there and fought. Even after settling in this land, they were respectively united as families with the same ancestry, Zongzi. They were identified by their surnames and performed ancestral festivals together. The people belonging to the same Zongzi were firmly tied, horizontally and vertically. They inherit status and property through the male line.
What if he had brothers?
In the nomadic Germanics, each brother divided the properties and moved to a different place, while in the settled Asians, only the eldest son inherited the status and all the farmland, and his younger brothers became his vassals and received portions of the territory.
It would be like being treated as illegitimate children.
However, as each branch family was inherited similarly, Zongzi eventually became the branch family federation, and their consensus determined the actual management. On the other hand, for the direct heir of the main family, the suzerain, only a small territory under its direct control, and the right to be the ritual master of its ancestors were left. Namely, he was just a top decoration.
But he still had the ultimate decision-making power, right?
No, the ruler of Zongzi was the clan's founder, as ever.
What? Such a man must have died a long time ago.
Therefore, the suzerain summoned the deceased founder. It was a necromancer, Ru, who became intoxicated, possessed by the founder's soul, and transmitted his message. Naturally, the branch family federation had beforehand prescribed its words.
Even today, the Asians only ritually communicate their collective conclusion.
In the 6th century BC, Confucius was born in a Ru family. His country Lu was a branch of the authentic Zhou dynasty, but in the confusing age, the dynasty was already weakened, and emerging powers threatened Lu. In addition, Lu was also controlled by its further branch families.
Was he just a puppet of them?
He didn't want to be that. So he learned Tao divination in fashion, and studied court manners in tradition. At 34, Duke Zhao of Lu sent Confucius to study in eastern Zhou. However, when Confucius returned, the branch families had expelled Duke Zhao. He fled to the enemy state Qi, but could not get any position. So at 40, he opened a little private school in Lu.
Rules relating to this were probably discriminated against.
The schoolmaster Confucius was finally appointed a village mayor in 501 BC, at 52. He made his mark, and promoted by the direct selection of Duke Ding, the younger brother of Zhao, he organized diplomacy with the neighboring great power Qi. Thus, he became the attorney general, and dominated even the branch families of Lu. His disciples also increased to 3,000. However, in 497 BC, the branch families corrupted Duke Ding, and made him expel Confucius.
Did he fall from grace, just in 4 years?
While canvassing, he searched for countries that would recruit him and his principal disciples, in vain. Eventually at 69, he returned to Lu in 486 BC, and died in 479 BC, as just a schoolmaster.
His life was almost a failure. What did he teach in his private school? Necromancy?
Indeed, it was his family business, but he disliked such an occult hoax. He studied himself, eulogy of Taoism, and the court manners of the Zhou dynasty. Duke of Zhou, the younger brother of the founder of Zhou, accomplished both. Confucius found that both were originally one. Although until then, eulogy was just a divination to predict the future with turtle shells or divining sticks, as Xiangxiu Yi, Confucius thought of yin-yang zhu-yun, namely that yin-yang ruled the progress of things, and realized that Duke of Zhou would positively arrange the yin-yang of the situation by the court manners, as Yi Li Yi.
Eulogy was not a divination more, but a social science.
He thought the key to ending the chaos in China was restoring the court manners of the Zhou dynasty. Fortunately, his Lu was the state Duke of Zhou founded. Confucius could read old documents, and hear about them, from old men. In addition, he visited Eastern Zhou, the descendants of the Zhou dynasty, to study them. He traveled preaching about this, to feudal lords, and the youths who shared his ideas, gathered at his private school.
However, the Zhou dynasty predates Confucius by several hundred years. Could he know the court manners exactly?
Most was probably just his idealistic fantasy. In the first place, the real Zhou dynasty was not so stable, even with the court manners. However, Confucius emphasized not the formality of the manners, but the spirit of it, ren, or cultivated humanity. To master it, he imposed on his disciples to learn Shishuli literature, history, courtesy, and music. He called this educational method, Boen learning widely and behaving strictly.
He was just a nostalgic taste for the better old days. Could he develop sophisticated humanity? Did the laws adopt him and his disciple with such a culture?
Confucius could not get any position, and the successful disciples were also few. But some lords were interested in his ideas. His ideal of Ren approved of intimacy as the nature of humanity, and insisted on prioritizing close relatives. That meant repelling the overtaking by the branch family federation, and restoring the original Zongzu family system, led by the suzerain. In addition, it requested the social order of respect and affection between parents and children, the old and the young, and a master and his vassals.
The society at that time would be full of betrayal and rebellion, even within the family and the state. After Confucius' death, what happened to his school?
First, Confucianists compiled Confucius' words and deeds into the Analects. However, Confucius had taught depending on the person and the occasion, so his teachings were often inconsistent. In addition, unlike the old disciples, who accompanied Confucius on his arduous journeys, the younger disciples who entered his school later were in discord.
The young without hardship are often arrogant.
Since the time of Confucius' death, the authority of the Eastern Zhou weakened, the seven great kingdoms stood side by side, as the warring states period. After all, Zhengzi took over the Lu school, valued filial piety, and preserved rituals for the old Zongzu family system, while Zixia left for the West, and academically taught classics to his new disciples in Wei.
When the Eastern Zhou declined, the brother state Lu would also struggle to survive.
The Lu school was conservative and speculative. The master Zhengzi wrote Dashui, the Great Learning, to explain the method, from studying things, to governing the world. After that, Confucius' grandson, Zixi, inherited the school, and insisted on the central balance, to comply with respective heavenly missions, in his Zhonyang, the doctrine of the mean. On the other hand, the Zixia's Wei school was pessimistic, because the study of classics revealed that the real Zhou dynasty was not so ideal. Instead, they produced many practical bureaucrats.
Both schools were contrasting.
Mozi was of low birth in Lu, just like Confucius, and probably learned under a Confucianist in his childhood. However, he could not agree with Confucius Ren, prioritizing close relatives, so instead insisted on Jian'ai, universal love. He became a minister of Song, the southern neighboring state of Lu, and established there his original private school, Moism, to oppose Confucianism. Disliking war, he emphasized the need to build a defensive castle. He also denied fate, and asked for effort, without vain music and literature.
He was openly hostile towards Confucianism.
Also from the Wei school, Li Kui became independent, as a legalist. He denied the delusion of the ancient court manners more, and insisted on the clear positive law, to reward and punish. He served and developed the Wei dynasty, with the capable bureaucrats he newly recruited through the open competition.
In China, based on the Zongzu family system, adopting anyone as a high official was revolutionary.
Legalist Cheng Yang was not used much in Wei, so he moved west to the Little Qin. Breaking away from tradition, and carrying out legal reform, he elevated Qin to a great power by the talents he gathered. Also, the new Qi established in the 4th century BC, seeking to gain hegemony over China, invited many scholars, and encouraged them to conduct research and discussion. It was named the Zixia Academy, and the scholars of Taoism, Confucianism, Moism, legalism, etc., were called various masters and 100 schools.
Emerging states needed new strategies.
From the Confucianist Lu school, based on the traditional Zongzu family system, Mencius paraded into the Zixia Academy with his many disciples, in 318 BC, and demanded special treatment, as a noble guest. In contrast to his arrogant attitude, he preached that, Ren, good humanity, is the original nature of humans, and our mission. His fellow, Zhuangzi, hating artificial pretty words like Mencius, converted to Taoism, that respects Wu Wei Ziran, do nothing and leave all to nature, and retired to the life of the ordinary people.
Mencius might be the rightful successor of Confucius, but troublesome.
Anyway, Mencius and his disciples taught Confucianism there. Xunzi also studied it at the Zixia Academy, but was shocked by the contradiction between Mencius' high-sounding talk and his exorbitant arrogance. Contrary to Mencius, he thought, human nature is rather evil, and advocated the need for a strict formal manner, to correct the evils. Thus, he formed another party, in the same Lu school.
Mencius' education worked negatively.
Zhou Yan studied history at the Zixia Academy. Not only following Confucius Yin-Yang Zhu-Yun, he added Wu Da-Ji Yun, from Wu Qi's theory. He thought, dynasties transfer from mud trust, wood humanity, metal justice, fire wisdom, water decorum, to the first again, because the latter is superior to the former.
Wu Qi's of Taoism transformed Confucian virtues.
Han Fei and Li Si learned under the Confucianist Xunzi of evil nature theory. They thought, explicit law is more effective than the stale manner, and converted to legalism. At that time, the Qing gained hegemony, with its victory at the Battle of Changping in 260 BC. Han Fei returned to his homeland, the Little Han, and tried to strengthen it, while Li Si was employed by Shi Huang, of Qin. Li Si tricked his old friend Han Fei, into committing suicide. Thus, Qin absorbed Han, and unified all of China, in 221 BC.
Li Si was not a simple legalist, but rather a schemer.
The new emperor Shi Huang, of the Qin dynasty, adopted Li Si's legalism and meritocracy, without considering the candidate's origin. Confucianists strongly criticized the disregard for the traditional Zongzu family system. Li Si carried out without hesitation the burning of books and burying of scholars.
The Confucians had underestimated him.
However, the Qin dynasty quickly self-destruct. As legalism, it applied the uniform laws to the vast unified China, but it did not suit the actual circumstances of each region. Eventually, a rebellion broke out, and another Han dynasty was established in 207 BC. It adopted an eclectic policy of centralizing power, but leaving local matters to the local authorities. It restored the Zongzu family system, so that the Confucianists played an active role again, as their ritual masters.
Reality doesn't always follow logic.
Although many classics of Confucianism were lost, by the burning of books and burying of scholars, Confucianists memorized and reconstructed them. However, old texts were also discovered in plaster walls and tombs. Thus, Confucian classics were divided into two different systems, the modern texts and the old texts, and debates had arisen over their authenticity. After all, the modern texts were regarded as orthodox.
Old texts might seem more reliable, but they probably contained many forgeries.
Initially, the Han dynasty liked Huang Laoism, leaving things in the field, following the Taoist legend of Huang Di and Laozi's policy, and appointed various scholars as doctors to advise it. One of them, Dr. Dong Zhongshu, suggested the 7th Emperor Wu, limiting doctors to Confucianists, to strengthen the central bureaucratic system. Thus, Confucianism became the national school, in 136 BC.
A huge empire could not be managed by leaving go to the field.
Studying history, Dr. Dong regarded Confucius Yin-Yang Zhu-Yun as a constitution of the state. Thus, Sanwang of master and servant, father and son, and husband and wife, are the principles of humanity, as the combinations of yin and yang. He also believed in Zhou Yan's Wu Da Ji Yun, and thought, good or bad politics are reflected in heavenly grace and disasters. However, this theory angered the Emperor Wu, and he was demoted.
Emperor Wu would not like to be estimated even by heaven. In addition, Dr. Dong shifted Confucius to a state constitutor higher than the emperors.
After that, Confucius became considered a prophet based on Tao, and many mystical commentaries of the Confucian classics, Chen Wei, were produced, to explore the occult meanings. Moreover, abusing Chen Wei, Wang Mang, usurped the throne from the Han Dynasty in 8 CE, and the peasant rebellion against him, followed Chen Wei too. Emperor Guangwu also used Chen Wei, to restore the Eastern Han Dynasty, in 25 CE.
Professing Chen Wei was the source of political turmoil.
Therefore, the third Emperor Zhang invited the leading Confucians to the Baihuguan, the White Tiger Hall in his court, in 79, to unify the texts and the doctrines, especially between the modern texts and the old ones, the Orthodox and Chen Wei. Thus, Baihutong became the official common doctrine. It was in line with the late Dr. Dong Zhongshu's view, so that it was based on Sanwan Wuchang, 3 bonds and 5 morals, master and servant, father and son, and husband and wife, and humanity, justice, decorum, wisdom, and trust. However, while Confucian scholars focused on interpreting the texts, eunuchs and clansmen took over power, and the Han Dynasty fell in 220.
No matter how much they preached ethics, some would not follow it.
Nevertheless, bureaucrats avoided discussing politics, as ever. He Yan and Wang Bi began Xuanshui, mystic study or metaphysics. They regarded Yi Jing as the Confucian Bible, while Lao Zian's Wanzi of Taoism as the commentary for it. They thought, the arche of the world was nothing, and it successively produced everything. Therefore, everything follows the natural Tao, so we also should not do any additional things, and better keep in harmony with the existing.
That seems like a typical bureaucratic non-confrontational way.
True. Confucianists at that time lost the will to make the world better. As a result, the ordinary people turned to the magic of Taoism and the grace of Buddhism.